Hey everybody, in today's video, I'm going to show you how to make this cute little gnome scene. But first, I have to show you this adorable little squirrel that my friend Seal sent me for my birthday. Isn't that the cutest? I have so many cute squirrels now. I love this little guy. Just adorable. Reminds me of the, that tea, what is it called? Red something, where you used to get little figurines in the tea. Reminds me of that. I used to love opening red rose tea. Okay, I have stamped my two little gnomes on a card panel and masked them with masking paper. Then I cut a piece of masking paper to the same width, but I used my circle infinity dies to cut out a circle. Most of this is going to be marker coloring, but I am going to do a little bit of ink blending for the moon, and that's why I had to have the gnomes masked, because to create the moon behind them and then to create the sky around the moon, I needed both pieces of my mask cut. So I need to keep the circle, and I needed the negative space to create the moon. Now, I find it easiest to put the positive space back inside the negative space before removing the negative space, and that's so you don't get a halo. So I also cut a hillside, and you can see that I'm just using a scrap of masking paper because I'm super cheap about hanging on to every little bit of it. So this one end was kind of skinny because I'd cut something else out of it. So I'll cover that up with the piece that has the negative space in it so that I can ink blend the sky. So this is just a much quicker way to do this than coloring with markers. So I have a nice pale yellow moon, and around that I'm going to put a very dark blue sky. So I'm using nautical ink, which is like a classic navy. It's a very neutral navy blue. And I will just get a little bit of that off on my mat and then start ink blending around the moon. But I do want this to be pretty dark. And just don't forget, before you do this part, do not remove the gnome masks. Otherwise, your gnomes are going to be dark blue, and then I don't know what's going to happen. Then you're just kind of on your own at this point. So I'll put a second layer of ink. When I'm adding dark colors like this, I don't really worry if the first layers are not super blended, because by the time you get all of the ink on this sky, it's going to be completely saturated with ink. It's going to look smooth. You don't have to worry about it as you're building it up. So before I remove the mask, I'm just going to tap my Posca ink pen. I usually just prime the pen a couple times so it's getting a lot of ink. Or you can see I picked a little bit up from that puddle, just squeeze a little bit out on a piece of paper and then pick it up and then just tap it with something else. And that works great for stars or any kind of splatter. I actually have another video coming up where I use the little splatter for Christmas lights, like little sparkles around the Christmas lights. And I used exactly the same process. So now I will remove the moon. And you can see all the little stars that are on there. Some of them are light, some of them are dark. It works great. And I'm going to remove this little hillside. So I had put Post-it notes on there because I know myself. And I tend to forget that stuff is masked. And I just ink blend into areas that I'm not supposed to be ink blending into. So that's what that's all about. So now I can unmask the gnome images, and you'll be able to see these cute little gnomes, little Mr. and Mrs. Gnome, very cute. And then I just put the mask back onto the stamp set. I always do this. You've seen me do this before. So now you can see that I've got just a little bit of color on that moon, and that's going to differentiate it from the snow. But I need that same color to go into my scene. So I'm adding just a very pale OLO marker to the edges of the gnomes, like what is closest to the center of this scene, and also a little bit to the snow. We're just going to do a very simple back and forth marker for the snow, and so I'm just adding a little bit of that reflection. Now what I'll do is I'll build up a couple of different blues. This is both a combination of a reflection of the sky color, but also just because as a survivor of upstate New York, I can tell you that snow looks more blue than it looks anything else at night. And this is supposed to be a nighttime scene. So we're just going to do these very abstract swipes. This is a technique that really doesn't take any coloring skill, and so it's kind of fun. And it really comes together after you have a few layers of color built up. The first time that I did this, I was in a class and we were actually doing a sunset. So the colors we were using were a pink, an orange, a red, a yellow, but we did the same sort of back and forth swiping. And then I started to see videos of people using that same technique to build up snow scenes. And I thought that that was such a cool and fun way to use that. But if you had, say, an ocean scene, and then above that, and that may be what we were doing in the class, I don't remember. And then above that, you had like a really vibrant sunset. Then these same kind of strokes could be in the water that are in the sky. And that gives you just a nice balanced look of sort of reflective surfaces. So snow is a reflective surface. And so reflecting the sky really helps here. So for that, I will go in with a much darker blue. I love this color of blue, by the way. I think this is really pretty. And don't be afraid of the darker colors when you're doing something like snow, because it's that contrast between those first light colors that you put on there and the dark colors that's going to make it look like light is shining down. Also be careful to make sure that you leave some open white space, because that will look highly reflective like you often see on snow. Now I'm also putting some lighter blues into that center portion where that light is coming down from the moon. So those will blend, you'll get like some greenish tones, and that's totally normal. That's exactly how it would look if those two colors were blended together as in a light source and something that's blue in real life. So now I will go about coloring the gnomes. I'm leaving that bright little bit of yellow on their faces, so you can see there how it really looks like there's light there, and just coloring that back half of their face and adding a little bit of shading. So I'll do the same thing on the legs and their hands, just giving little shadows there. So I'll do the same thing on their feet, and I am, of course, going to be adding a nice bold red here. But I decided to make her hair kind of a lighter color that'll sort of go with that glowy look that you're seeing all over the place from the Moonlight. So she's going to be a little fair-haired girl. Now I'll take my bright red and I'll just work my way towards that moonlit part of the gnome and color him all in his nice festive little outfit. But I will do some blending at the edges of both of these. We're going to do a little bit of palette blending just to get that little highlight onto the outfits, but also to make it look sort of seamless. So I'll color her the same way. The great thing about this image is you can leave the apron and you can leave his beard completely white. So it's actually a pretty quick coloring image, even though there's a lot of detail here. So their hats will just be matchy-matchy. I'll color those in, just being very careful to sort of avoid that highlighted part. So I'm going to add the little booties in red. Those look great. And now I'll do the palette blending. So that involves scribbling the red onto my glass mat, picking that up with the same yellow marker that I used for the moon, and then just blending that wherever I have just a little tiny bit of that highlight. And that just looks so realistic and really makes it look like you have light shining on your subject. So it's kind of a cheaty way to blend. I really like it. I use it a lot because I'm not just a complete coloring expert there, and this is a really easy way for me to make things blend. Some people are really good at just doing that with markers, but not me. So I like palette blending. So I'll do the same thing on the little male's hat. So cute. And then go ahead and blend the bottom parts and give this little guy a belt. I'm leaving some white space so that it looks sort of shiny, as in leather, on his belt. And then I'll come back and blend her skirt. And the bottom of his kind of looks like a skirt too. And then his little shoes. So I forgot to color her little bow and her sleeves. So I will just fill those in and then add some deep dark shadows and fix some mistakes where I went outside the lines with my little 0. And now I decided that I wanted a more prominent shadow than the simple shadow that I had underneath the 2 figures. And so I'm just taking the masks and reversing them to create a little outline for myself. And then I'll just fill that in with a dark marker. So this is a really easy way to do shadows. It's one of the great things about having matching dies with your stamps. Even if you're not using the dies, you can always use them to create a shadow. I have a full shadows and reflections class with lots of videos on lots of different ways to do shadows. You can check that out in my classroom. I will put the address here on the screen, and you will learn so much about all the different ways you can create shadows. Some simple ways, some more complex ways, using different supplies like dies, not using dies, using clear stamps, all kinds of stuff. It's a great class. So head over there and check out my classroom and check out the other classes I have as well. So I will do the same for the little man. Get that little shadow of his beard. So cute. This is such a fun and festive little Christmas scene, and they look so cute just smiling at each other in front of that moon. Look, no mittens, no gloves. They must be very hardy. So I had a little bit of adhesive on there, so I just removed that with my adhesive eraser. But I love the way that snow looks all around the edges with those little simple swipes of color. I think that you can get something really super realistic. So I left myself enough room in the center for the sentiment. I really like this. There's no one like you. And I have plenty of room for that. So I think that that is the one that I will add. And I will just pop that in my Misty, which probably needs to go through my Misty car wash. I was using paint, and I have a little bit of paint on the lid, but it's a tool, right? It's supposed to be well loved and used, even if that means it has a little paint on it. So I'll pop my magnet on there and just stamp this in black ink. And I think this is such a cute card. So this could be used for a holiday card or just a general winter card. It could be used for an anniversary, anything like that, or just a simple friendship card, even though it has some cute kind of winter themed images. So here's the finished card. Be sure and head over to my Instagram because we're having a fun hop for a very special lady today. And go to my blog for more information if you're watching this later. And thanks so much for watching.